The Week in Space. CBS News selective color coverage of the mission of Gemini 9 and Project Surveyor. Now the launching of astronauts Cernan and Stafford for the start of their 3 days in space. Reporting again from Cape Kennedy, CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good morning, and it's windy, quite gusty, and cloud covered here at Cape Kennedy, and there's quite a storm area building up to the north of here. But we're assured by the weatherman that things are going to be all right for the launch of the Gemini spacecraft with astronauts Stafford and Cernan some 38 minutes from now. Their target vehicle is in a perfect orbit, circling the Earth. It's now midway over Australia. We'll be back over the Cape here in 38 minutes, and Stafford and Cernan will go aloft to chase it. We're expecting an announcement just about now from Jack King, the voice of Mission Control here at the Cape.
This is Gemini Launch Control coming up on T-minus 34 minutes and counting. Our countdown at Launch Complex 19 still going very smoothly at this point. In process are a series of telemetry checks with both the Gemini launch vehicle and spacecraft. The pilots, Tom Stafford and Gene Cernan, are participating in these tests. They've also just completed a series of ultra-high frequency communications checks with Bill Aldrin in the blockhouse. As our countdown proceeds down, we will have a built-in hold at the 3-minute mark in the count. This hold will last a little more than 3 minutes. It may be between 3 minutes and 3 minutes and 30 seconds. The flight director will advise the Cape at the 18-minute mark in the count the exact time that he wants us to launch. The launch vehicle test conductor for Gemini will come back about 10 minutes later and announce the exact hold time. We will have a definite built-in hold at the 3-minute mark in the count if all proceeds as well as it is going at this time. We'll now switch to the Mission Control Center at Houston.
And this is Gemini Control in Houston. Our target vehicle is now passing over the continent of Australia. Carnarvon gave us a go for the Gemini launch. All systems aboard the target are in go condition, with the exception, of course, that we cannot confirm whether the shroud has separated. Carnarvon reported they have a good track. Insertion velocity was 25,368.6 feet per second, and the planned feet per second at insertion was 25,368.3 feet per second. So it was almost right on the money, only 0.3 of a second off in speed. Now, we would like to discuss just a little bit, again, the problem we have indicated with the RCS system aboard the target. We did report that ring B pressure is reading low, and we do have a low reading on that. During the launch phase, when the target separated from the Atlas launch vehicle, it was noticed that there was a lot of thruster activity. Ring B thrusters were being used to stabilize the target as it separated from the Atlas. And so we did use some of the fuel. It is reading low. Ring A is reading very well, and we have plenty of fuel aboard in Ring A to complete the rendezvous portion of the mission. Now, should the shroud still be in place, we would not attempt to dock Gemini 9 with the target. However, the crew will be able to determine visually whether that shroud is still in place after they get in the proximity of the target vehicle. This is Gemini Control. We are T-minus 30 minutes and 46 seconds.
A little explanation of those two problems. First, an explanation of the countdown discrepancy. The clock that you see occasionally supered on your screen here is a countdown to the launch time of the Gemini, less 3 minutes. There is a built-in hold of 3 minutes. So if the clock shows 30 minutes, for instance, it's actually 33 minutes to the expected launch time. That hold is built in to make a final adjustment in the launch time to match that of the target vehicle coming overhead as it is tracked across the United States. those two other problems that are being mentioned. One, the shroud. Well, the shroud is a thin metal covering around the target that protects it during the ascent through the atmosphere until the vehicle reaches space, the altitude at which it separates from the booster and goes into orbit. That shroud is jettisoned immediately after the booster drops away itself. There has been no indication on the board at Houston on the automatic telemetry, the automatic signals back from the target vehicle, that the shroud has jettisoned. If the shroud is not jettisoned, it would mean that the spacecraft cannot dock with that target vehicle as expected. It could still rendezvous with it, but not dock with it, since the shroud covers the docking collar into which the Gemini must fit for a complete docking maneuver. Also, if the shroud is still around the vehicle, there probably would not be any attempt at a spacewalk toward the target vehicle, inasmuch as those squibs, those pyrotechnic, the in fact dynamite caps inside of the shroud that blow the shroud away from the target would be armed, and any electrical static discharge from the Gemini could perhaps set them off, endangering the astronauts. They wouldn't come, in other words, too close to that target vehicle. However, there are good other indications that the shroud has jettisoned. For instance, the target cooled down very rapidly at just the right time that would indicate the shroud had dropped away and that the minus 450 degrees temperature of space was hitting the target. There also were other indications. The radar transponder is indicating that it's working, and that is most likely if the shroud had jettisoned. So it's believed that the shroud has jettisoned, but that their signals back to Earth simply are not adequate to indicate that as yet. But at any rate, Stafford and Cernan can find out about that when they get up there, and they're going anyway, of course, after that target vehicle. They got into their spacecraft some hours ago, and we can show you by videotape their arrival at pad 19 after they had suited up at nearby pad 16, and then were transported over in that van that we have seen them enter and exit so many times. Here they are as they exited at pad 19. Stafford there in the front, and then Cernan. And they walk across to the elevator, which carries them up 100 feet to the top of the Titan, the white room surrounding their spacecraft. We really couldn't get much of a look at it there, but we're told they were carrying a couple of large pasteboard signs, round signs that they had made. Cernan said, "We try harder," and Stafford said the same thing in German. Undoubtedly, for the benefit of Gunter Wendt, the White Room supervisor, who's launched every one of our astronauts so far and prepared the spacecraft for them. Gunter came here from Germany. And that's probably the reason for the German sign. They're reminiscent of a certain lease auto companies who says they're number 2. Nobody says that Stafford and Cernan are number 2, but they do say they're trying harder. Here you see the technicians inserting them into the spacecraft. They went into the spacecraft at 9:50 Central Standard Time, or Eastern Standard Time rather, which was an hour and 20 minutes ago. This videotape made at that time with our small camera that we are permitted to have up there in that white room. Since then, they have heard the blast-off. 10 minutes after that scene you just saw, they heard the blast-off of the Atlas, and very shortly thereafter, their own erector, which we used to call a gantry. The erector was pulled back from the Titan, leaving it sitting alone, as you can see back there, out on pad 19. And when the erector came back, why, of course, they were able to see the Cape from there, and Cernan said it was a beautiful sight. Stafford concurred. He said it was wonderful to be getting this close to launch. Around the world, now somewhere a little bit to the east of Australia, the target vehicle is on its way back here toward the Cape, and for the eventual meeting this afternoon with the Gemini. And, of course, that progress is being tracked by the Worldwide Tracking Network, and Dallas Townsend at our CBS News Space Center in New York is keeping track of the tracking network. We'll have that report for you in a moment.
New from Standard Brands. Soft bluebonnet margarine. Soft enough to spread on a potato chip. And Bluebonnet did it to demonstrate a great new margarine discovery. New soft Bluebonnet. So soft it spreads on anything, from thinnest crackers to softest white bread. Just taste that great Bluebonnet flavor. And it's low in saturated fat. 2 table service tubs in every pound. Everything's better with Bluebonnet on it. Here's a loaded question for men only.
What will it take to get your wife to use Chasen Sanborn coffee? Say it's got He-Man flavor, that it brews up a storm. It's full of beans? Ha! All she has to do is try. Because if she hasn't tasted our coffee lately, she doesn't know about the extra flavor in instant Chasen Sanborn. A new heftier blend. What's the heftier all about? She'll find out.
This is Dallas Townsend at the CBS News Space Center in New York. Today and throughout the 3 days of this Gemini 9 flight, astronauts Tom Stafford and Eugene Cernan will be keeping in touch with Mission Control in Houston by means of a worldwide tracking network, a series of miniature control centers located strategically all along the spacecraft's route, and all with a vital role in the mission's success. For example, Carnarvon in Australia, which Al Chop mentioned in his report from Mission Control in Houston a few moments ago. It's over Carnarvon this afternoon that Gemini will fire its thrusters for the first of those delicate space maneuvers needed to catch up with the target vehicle. And it's while the spacecraft is on another pass over Carnarvon, about 2.5 hours from now, that it will lock its radar onto the target vehicle prior to finally closing in for the rendezvous. And the Hawaii tracking station, which later this afternoon will give the astronauts the order to go for their first docking attempt. And many others, a vast network in which perhaps thousands of people of many nationalities are cooperating to make the space flight a success. Although the weather hasn't been too bright at Cape Kennedy, as Walter Cronkite has been pointing out, forecasts for all the main recovery areas around the world are good. And now let's take a quick look at how today's rendezvous mission will look on our Coldsman orbital map. From Cape Kennedy there, the target vehicle started on its first revolution just over an hour ago. And as it completes that revolution a few minutes from now, 185 miles up over Cape Kennedy, Gemini 9 will be launched. And there you see the 2 of them, the 2 astronauts in Gemini 9, beginning about 700 miles behind and far below, but gradually moving up and closing in. This is, of course, a very much speeded up version of a chase through space that will actually take 4 hours and involve a series of complicated maneuvers by the Gemini spacecraft. The 2 vehicles will finally meet at their appointed rendezvous over the Indian Ocean, and they'll fly formation for a while, just a few feet apart, before the first docking maneuver high above Hawaii. That rendezvous, about 4:45 this afternoon, New York time, will be, in fact, the fastest rendezvous in space history, 1 whole revolution ahead of the Earth, faster than Gemini 8. And now to Dave Shoemaker in St. Louis.
Well, Dallas, I suppose it proves absolutely nothing except that we're optimists, but our ATDA, our target vehicle at least, has jettisoned its shroud. Bob, let's take a look at the orbiting target vehicle. Where would that shroud be? Just right on a cap over the end?
That's right. It's a streamlined nose cap that would fit over the end of the docking cone there and make it look something like a bullet at the time of launch and while it's passing through the atmosphere.
From what you've heard, would you say that it seems like pretty good odds that it has jettisoned the shroud?
It sounds like it. We've got a couple of secondary type indications. One of them, the temperature in the docking cone area has increased. This kind of jettison, and the sun is shining on the area and it's warming up. The other is that when the shroud jettisoned, you get a slight jarring of the vehicle, which would change its rates a little bit, and the rate gyros have been reported to have picked up a slight increase in rate of the vehicle at the time the shroud was supposed to be jettisoned.
Well, would you agree that it's not a recommended technique for Gene Cernan to go out there and, say, give it a kick to knock it loose?
I think so. I'm not real familiar with the details of the pyrotechnic system on the shroud, but if a relay could be armed so that it could go off accidentally there and the shroud blow, and then of course that could probably be pretty dangerous.
You have Cernan in a higher orbit still, I suppose. Huh? What about the problems of rendezvousing and docking with this target vehicle, even if it is lost its shroud?
Well, our radar indication, of course, due to the tumbling of the vehicle, will be intermittent. That is, it will come on and be there for a while, and then as it turns around, the antenna is pointing the other way, it'll go off, kind of like a TV set maybe when an airplane flies over your house. It interferes with a normal radar pattern. The TDA, however, is attached to the front of this ATDA vehicle, and we have two lights on it, as you can see on the upper portion of the picture here. These are 20-watt bulbs, so each one of them is about the brightness of the inside of your refrigerator.
That's
so
bright enough to see.
You can from a mile or two. Now that's, they'll turn these on and be looking at them, of course, after the bright flashing light has been turned off. The back end of the ATDA, as we can see here, contains thrusters. It's essentially an unused Gemini nose section, which was added to the back of the vehicle here to stabilize it. And then directly behind that, we have a battery section, which contains 3 batteries to furnish electrical power for this vehicle.
Incidentally, Walter, to you earlier, you and Dallas were talking about the ATDA and mentioning the nickname that the press has given it of the glob. I wanted to prove to Bob that I knew space jargon, and I called it a glob, and here at McDonnell where they built it, they never heard of it. So we're getting too technical for the engineers.
That's the way it goes sometimes.
Well, I don't blame you, Bob, for not calling it the glob. You ought to be pretty proud of it. It really is a rather fantastic thing that has happened with that target vehicle, and I think that nobody blamed me for putting in a word for McDonnell here on that. It was after October 25th when the Agena itself failed on the Gemini 6 launch that you fellows out there plunged in and built this device out of, well, really almost scrap that you had around there from old Gemini spacecraft. The control system, the attitude control system on this target vehicle is indeed part of the, I believe, the re-entry control system of the Gemini 6, the same one that Stafford flew in space. And real truth, this target vehicle is a blood brother of the Gemini spacecraft, related far closer to that than it is to the Agena it replaced. It has many of the features and characteristics, parts at any rate, not characteristics, flight characteristics of the Gemini. The main thing is, as you fellows yourselves have reported out there, it doesn't have the propulsion system, and we're going to be a little behind after this mission, even as successful as it promises to be, since we will not have had either in Gemini 8 or Gemini 9 the chance to practice with that propulsion system of the Agena, which in effect is a test of a means of, in a sense, refueling in space, of getting an added boost from rockets already put up there, spacecraft put up there, and waiting for a manned craft. CBS News color coverage of Gemini 9 will continue in a moment.
Do you have the rain tire?
Do we have the rain tire? No, but we have something just as good.
It's got to be the rain tire. Do you have the rain tire?
Mister, we have all kinds of precipitation tires. Hail tires, sleet tires, slush tires, drizzle tires, smog, and fog tires.
No, thanks. I want the rain tire. Do you have the rain tire?
Yes, sir. We're U.S. Royal. The only ones who have the rain tire. And it costs about the same as ordinary tires. This tire...
Look, I'm sold. Put them on. That's the one.
This is Walter Cronkite back at our CBS News Space Center at Cape Kennedy, one of our 3 CBS News Space Centers for this flight of Gemini 9. Here, St. Louis at McDonnell Aircraft, where we have our mock-up of the spacecraft and the target vehicle and the spacewalk, and in New York, where we will be covering the recovery of the Gemini 9, scheduled for an Atlantic splashdown on Saturday morning, after 3 days in space. 3 days which will include the dramatic highlight tomorrow morning of a 2.5-hour spacewalk by this 32-year-old pilot of the Gemini 9, Eugene Cernan, youngest man yet to go into space. If all goes well, Stafford and Cernan in Gemini 9 are to catch the ATDA and dock with it within 4.5 hours this afternoon. Using an exclusive CBS News animation, let's take a look at the various steps leading up to that docking in space. Now, after the Titan booster roars off from Cape Kennedy, astronauts Tom Stafford, Gene Cernan aboard will be inserted into orbit in a little more than 6 minutes. At that time, their orbital speed will be 17,500 miles an hour, and they will have achieved orbit. The chase of the Agena target vehicle begins. A 70,000-mile chase will be completed on the third orbit, one orbit sooner than before in the other Gemini mission. Initially, the ATDA will be in circular orbit 185 miles high. It's achieved that now. Gemini in elliptical orbit 100 by 168 miles. Gemini behind by some 700 miles. 50 minutes after liftoff, the first Gemini maneuver takes place. The spacecraft nears its first apogee then, or its high point. The thrusters are fired and the catch-up rate is reduced. At this time, Gemini trails the target by 480 miles. And this shows how the two orbits are changed in relation to each other by that first Gemini maneuver. Now, 1 hour and 6 minutes later, the second maneuver takes place. That adjusts the catch-up rate again, the altitude, and brings the Gemini closer to the target plane. Now Gemini trails its target by a little more than 200 miles. And again, our animation shows how the firing of the Gemini thrusters will affect the relationship between the two spacecraft. You see how the Gemini is now at one point touching the orbit of the other. Now comes a third and very important Gemini maneuver, 2 hours and 20 minutes into the flight, near the high point on the second revolution of the Earth. This purpose to circularize finally that Gemini orbit at 168 miles high. That's 168 miles nautical, or 185 miles statute miles, and bring it into the same orbit approximately. Take that back. That's 168 statute miles. It brings it into the same orbit as the target vehicle, but below it. It's 150 miles behind and 17 miles below now. Now it's time for the radar to send out signals, lock on to the receiving transponder on the target. And it's almost 2.5 hours into the flight, and the terminal phase of the final catch-up's beginning. The Gemini spacecraft is closing rapidly on its target. As night falls, the Gemini crew can see a light aboard the target vehicle there in the distance, as you noticed. Now Gemini moves in. The onboard computers helping the crew make small corrective burns. The radar is functioning also. Finally, as the range closes to less than 5 miles, the crew begins a semi-optical approach to the target. That means they look at it, but they also use their instruments. Rendezvous will be achieved over the Indian Ocean near Australia. Now, when the Gemini spacecraft and the target are only about 50 feet apart, they'll start flying in formation. That is, just 50 feet apart, they'll fly around the world at 17,500 miles an hour until the actual docking begins over Hawaii. Now, slowly, the Gemini will close the final few feet until it nudges together with the target. Moves in there. Wally Schirra said it's about like parking your car in a garage. But the vehicles are moving 17,500 miles an hour. However, at this point, in their relative speed, it's just about 1/3 of a mile an hour. And into the docking collar. That has to be done slowly and carefully, of course. Gemini 8 proved docking could be done, and the Gemini 9 crew are confident they're going to be successful. In actuality, there'll be more than one docking exercise in this flight. There are going to be a total of 9. The maneuver is going to be repeated many times to give these pilots, Stafford and Cernan, a chance to try their hand and their skill at it. So this will be a familiar configuration for a good part of the flight of Gemini 9. You've seen how docking's accomplished now. Well, with the flight of Gemini 9, the launch here some 14 minutes away. The countdown is T-11 or 10 now of 10:57, but there's a 3-minute hold in there. So it's about 13 minutes and 52 seconds to launch. Jack Siegel at IBM standing by to explain the relation of speed and altitude in these complicated maneuvers. Jack?
Walter, we have a couple of displays, demonstrations that we can use to give you an idea of the relationship of speed versus altitude. Here, the computer has generated a display showing the Earth in the center and 3 Gemini spacecraft at various orbital levels. Now let's start them in motion. And you'll see almost immediately that the one closest to Earth is moving fastest, The one furthest away is moving slowest. Now let's stop for a minute to give you a better look. This is not because the one closest to Earth has the least distance to travel. It is actually moving faster. It has to move faster to stay away from the pull of gravity. It is continually falling in towards the Earth. The gravity attraction is stronger here, and so it moves the fastest to counteract that. Now we have another display over here, a demonstration that we can use to give you an idea of the relationship of speed versus altitude. This surface has been shaped so that a ball moving around it acts somewhat like a planet moving around the sun or a satellite around the Earth. The surface is something like a wide cone, and the velocity that this ball has helps it stay up and counteract the pull of gravity. The surface friction of the ball and the cone actually act like the Earth's atmosphere to take velocity away from it, and it gradually goes back down in towards the Earth. Now let me show, here is, for instance, the ATDA in a high circular orbit, and here's the Agena. Now watch, you'll see the Agena's caught up, it is passed, now it is catching up again. Anything in a lower orbit is moving faster. We're able to get this across fairly easily with this demonstration. Now, Walter, we have one other thing that we can show you. Down in Houston recently, I was explaining this conical surface demonstration to astronaut Tom Stafford and trying to describe it to him, and he said, well, why don't you show something else that anybody can do in their homes? So here's something for any of your viewers. Take a weight on the end of a length of string or cord, like here I have some keys at the end of a chain, and start it rotating. Here we have it moving in a circle, and then suddenly shorten the length, and you'll see it speed up. That also demonstrates this principle of orbital mechanics. And back to you, Walter.
Jack Siegel, I'm going to get you a job at the high school teaching orbital physics. That was an excellent demonstration. Thanks a lot. We're getting a picture now from the USS Wasp. It's about 1,000 miles out in the Atlantic now, downrange from Cape Kennedy here. With this picture live being transmitted by satellite back to us here. Bill Ryan's aboard the Wasp.
On her launch abort station, 1,120 miles east of Cape Kennedy, 525 miles southeast of Bermuda. And with the Wasp is her plane guard destroyer, the USS Wilson, which will stay with this prime recovery ship throughout the flight and recovery of Gemini 9. The McCaffrey, 275 miles east of the Cape. The Bordelon, 705 miles east of the Cape. If all goes well and Gemini 9 achieves orbit, that will be the signal for these two ships to head for their home ports. It will also be the signal for the skipper of the Wasp, Captain Gordon Hartley, to start moving his prime recovery ship to the west in gradual steps to provide recovery facilities on Thursday and Friday should Gemini 9 fly less than her scheduled 3 days. By Saturday morning, we should be on station 425 miles east of Cape Kennedy, waiting to make a recovery after Gemini 9 has completed 44 revolutions. Weather in Wasp's area today is less than ideal. It's hazy. Some clouds range up to 14,000 feet, and 4-foot seas are running. But these conditions would not make recovery difficult, and most of Wasp's search and recovery aircraft are already airborne. For that story, here's Don Blair on the flight deck.
What you see here behind and around me in various stages of flight preparation are the Wasp's contingency aircraft. And past experience has shown how nice it is to have these ships in the air if and when something goes wrong with the prime flight team, which is already in the air and on the job. The Wasp has enough aircraft in reserve to duplicate its recovery force twice if necessary. But the real activity here on Recovery Day will be when the astronauts are brought on board. And if they do leave the spacecraft and come in by helicopter, then we'll be seeing them right here on the flight deck where we are now, with the helicopter setting down just forward of my present position. It'll be helo number 61 if it's the prime recovery ship. Now, if they stay with the spacecraft, which happens to be the wish of command pilot Tom Stafford, we'll see them down on the hangar deck level, with elevator 3 lowered to receive the spacecraft down in that position. So the Wasp is set from stem to stern. We sure hope the big show doesn't come before Saturday morning. This is Don Blair on the flight deck of the Wasp.
And it's T-minus 5 minutes in the count, T-minus 8 minutes to the actual launch, given a 3-minute hold. CBS News color coverage of Gemini 9 will continue in a moment.
his master. Gale winds, driving rain, blazing sun. Severe weather that demands the most from house paint. That's why so many homeowners here and everywhere give their homes the extra protection of Sherwin-Williams house paint. Unlike so-called bargain paints that often blister and peel in a year or two, Sherwin-Williams protects up to 3 years longer. Doesn't it make sense to give your home this longer-lasting protection too? You'll paint less often, and of course that means you save money with Sherwin-Williams house paint. Look for this Cover the Earth trademark. It tells you you're getting the highest quality in paint for home and industry. Sherwin-Williams paints.
Back here at our CBS News Space Center at Cape Kennedy. The count is T-minus 4 minutes, which actually means 7 minutes till the launch. The launch is due to come of Gemini 9 at 38 minutes and 20 seconds after 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and that is some 6 minutes and 48 seconds from now. Stafford and Cernan in their spacecraft. There may be some problem with the spacecraft. They test the ohms, that is the attitude maneuvering system of the spacecraft, the little tiny rockets which do that job just before launch. They made one test of it, and now they have ordered a second test, which is unusual and might indicate that they had some small problem with those ohms thrusters. However, we have no confirmation of that. We do expect to hear very shortly some more about it, however. It's T-minus 6 minutes and 12 seconds to the launch, with a 3-minute hold included in that figure as we wait for the target vehicle to come back over the Cape. And now here's Jack King.
We're coming up on 3 minutes. Mark, 3 minutes and holding. T-minus 3 minutes and holding. We are in the planned built-in hold that will help us coincide our launch with the orbit of the augmented target docking Agena, which is now coming over which will be coming over the Cape in a matter of some about 6 minutes from this time. The length of the hold, 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Thereafter, we will resume the countdown, aiming for T-minus 0, our ignition time of the Gemini launch vehicle of 38 minutes and 20 seconds after the hour. We have gone through a status check of the Gemini launch vehicle and the spacecraft, all major aspects just prior to coming into the hold, and they all report they are in a go condition. We will have another status check prior to resuming the countdown. When we do resume the count, the first thing that will happen is the Mod 3 guidance system will feed the flight parameters to the launch vehicle guidance system and the backup guidance, the spacecraft computer. It will feed in on the launch azimuth of, the flight azimuth of 97.7 degrees and the various other roll parameters that are required during the powered phase of the flight. Now, 3 minutes and holding, length of the hold, 3 minutes and 16 seconds. This is Gemini Launch Control.
No word from Jack King there about the fact that they did call for a second test of these ohms thrusters on the spacecraft, but experts here and out at McDonald's say they don't see any particular significance in that. The test conductor can always call for another test, but since it has not happened before, there must be some reason why he would require a second test. Maybe he just didn't get all the readings he wanted. We don't know yet. Still about a couple of minutes until the hold is picked up. Another minute or so till the hold is picked up and the count resumes. The cloud cover has grown heavier over the Cape. It's now down to 1,600 feet scattered, but there are other layers of scattered cloud so that by 14,000 feet it's a 10/10 cloud cover over the Cape. However, these days they don't seem to care so much about those cloud covers. They launch anyway, and they say at Mission Control there should be no restraint on the mission. Tom Stafford and Gene Cernan were not supposed to go up in this Gemini 9, you know. They were originally chosen as the backups for Elliott C. and Charles Bassett. But when C. and Bassett died in the crash of their jet plane last February 28th, Stafford and Cernan were immediately made the prime crew. Dave Shoemaker talked with them in Houston about the tragedy.
After the fact, after the accident was over, I know Gene and myself really didn't do a thing towards the flight for nearly 10 days. We were still very sad about the accident. We didn't even think about the flight plan or any of the training, and finally decided, well, we've got the ball, it's time to run with it, so we've been busy ever since. Gene might want to.
Yeah, as Tom said, of course, this isn't really the way you want to get assigned to a flight crew. You want to get assigned and be happy and maybe have a bottle of champagne, this type of thing. And this was a little bit different, but the responsibility of the flight is still there, and the requirements of what we have to accomplish in the Gemini program are still there. And I personally feel that now, today, that Gemini 9 is really going to pave the way for what we really have to do in the Gemini program yet to come. And the accident was a tragic one, since we worked with Elliot and Charlie, and of course they were both our very personal friends. But I think they would just as soon we look at Gemini 9 as a goal, and as I said earlier, a challenge and an accomplishment, and something that you can't ever look back in this program. You've got to look forward, and this is what we like to think we're doing.
We have now in the program 45 active astronauts and 5 astronaut scientists in training. It's now 2 minutes until liftoff. The countdown has been resumed. The Gemini spacecraft sitting there atop that Titan rocket. 170 tons of it out there on pad 19 of the spacecraft and the rocket together. 109 feet high it stands, almost 11 stories high. Here's Jack King.
We're going to recycle the countdown to T-minus 3 minutes and holding. We have not received a report on this time on the difficulty. We are now at T-minus 3 minutes and holding.
We didn't get
An announcement from Jack King in Mission Control that the count is going back to T-minus 3 and holding. They are holding at T-minus 3. Here's King again.
At a late moment in the countdown, a computer update or an update on the guidance system itself was not received. As a result, the countdown was stopped. We have returned to the 3-minute mark, and we are holding at T-minus 3 minutes. This is Gemini Launch Control.
Now, this could be critical and could possibly mean a delay in this flight today, postponement of it for 2 days. If the target vehicle was scheduled to be over the Cape, as we were led to believe, at 11:38:23, from that time on, they have just 5 minutes and 47 seconds to get the Gemini up for a rendezvous by the 6th revolution of the mission today.
If they, we're at T-minus 3 minutes and holding. Shortly after we resume the count, we stop the count at the 1 minute and 40-second mark. The reason, the Mod 3 guidance system that was to update the launch vehicle and the computer did not give the proper update. We have now fed it in and resumed the countdown once again. We are now at T-minus 2 minutes and 50 seconds and counting.
That we're at T-minus 50 seconds and counting, as you heard, and that is well within this window.
Spacecraft, it was acceptable. Now T-minus 2 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. This was the launch azimuth information fed to both the Gemini launch vehicle guidance system and the spacecraft computer, which acts as a backup. We are now holding again at 2 minutes and 25 seconds.
And another hold. Another hold at 2:25.
We are holding at 2 minutes and 25 seconds. We have once again recycled the countdown to 3 minutes and holding. T-minus 3 minutes and holding. We'll give a report to you on the difficulty as soon as we can check it.
The maximum time at which they have, if our information previously was correct, and we've had no other word from Mission Control of this other than their mention of a launch optimum launch time of 11:38:23. 38 minutes and 23 seconds after 11 Eastern Standard Time. Now, they've got 5 minutes and 47 seconds after that for this launch to go today. And that means that 11:42 would be the last time that they could launch. That is, if this target vehicle is on that schedule of being over the Cape and in the proper position for a nominal 11:38:23 launch.
This is Gemini launch control, T-minus 3 minutes and holding. Our difficulty is still with the guidance update for the launch vehicle and spacecraft. We have attempted to update the guidance system and the spacecraft computer twice. It has been rejected twice. We have received a switch over to secondary guidance in the control center when this has occurred. In other words, the information being fed for one reason or another is being rejected. We have now sent another update. We have resumed the countdown. We're at T-minus 2 minutes, 53 seconds and counting.
That time, that optimum
we once
time...
again have a switch over on the update. We will stop the count again and shortly and recycle the T-minus 3.
This does not sound good at all.
We are holding the count at 2 minutes and 40 seconds and once again recycling at the T-minus 3 minute mark. Same difficulty. The launch vehicle and the spacecraft are not accepting the Mod 3, the so-called Mod 3 update. This is the radio command guidance system feeding the update information. It's actually a computer, a ground computer, feeding update information to the launch vehicle guidance system, which is primary guidance system, and the spacecraft computer, which acts as a backup to the primary guidance system during flight. Still holding at T-minus 3 minutes. This is Gemini
maximum
launch
time
control.
I mentioned a moment ago is 44:10. We have refigured it. That was my mistake a moment ago. It's 44 minutes and 10 seconds, and that is now, and that means it's 3 minutes and 10 seconds from now, I believe, if I can read my clock properly. Perhaps that's 2 minutes and 10 seconds from now. 3 minutes. I've got a clock here.
This is Gemini launch control at T-minus 3 minutes and holding. We're discussing our problem in the blockhouse and with the various mission directors at this time. We have no further information other than the fact that the launch vehicle and spacecraft are not receiving the guidance update information in a proper manner. T-minus 3 minutes and holding. This is Gemini launch control.
We have no confirmation yet from Mission Control that 11:38:23 was the optimum launch time, but if it was, we have now passed the point at which they would launch today. We do not know that to be a fact as yet, however. It may be that they have other information on the trajectory of the target vehicle that we have not had ourselves. If so, they have not communicated it to us. But if the...
This is Gemini Control at Houston. Because we have missed our launch window on this initial orbit of our target vehicle, our mission director, Bill Schneider, has called a recycle of this launch for 2 days. We will recycle 2 days from now and attempt to launch Gemini 9 in pursuit of the target vehicle 2 days from now. This is Gemini Control.
Well, and another disappointment for all of us, and particularly, of course, for Tom Stafford and Eugene Cernan. For the 4th time, Tom Stafford has to get in that elevator and find the mission that he had planned and had gone down within 2 minutes, aborted. Now, what happens is that that target vehicle, of course, continues on its merry way at its 185-mile orbit. It will deteriorate from that orbit a very slight bit, but not enough to jeopardize the mission. And after all of the necessary groundwork is done to recycle, to re-prepare this mission, Gemini 9 will be scheduled for a launch on Friday morning. It could go tomorrow. There is a window, so-called, a time at which it could be launched to still meet out in space there, the target vehicle, but the groundwork necessary to reload the Titan fuel and all of the other problems means a 2-day delay. The time that they will go for first on the next Friday will be 8:39 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9:39 Eastern Daylight Time. They'll have 6 minutes approximately, as they did today, in order to get the Gemini up in time for a 6th revolution rendezvous, that is, rendezvous within 6 revolutions of the Earth. But on Friday, they'll have a second opportunity. It will come about an hour and 45 minutes later at around 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that window lasts some 35 minutes because of the orbitomechanics. This is the picture at Mission Control in Houston, Texas, the Manned Spacecraft Center, as these disappointed technicians and flight controllers have to pack up their books and go back to some night study now to try to find out what happened out there in the radio command guidance system. It may have had nothing to do with the spacecraft itself. It could have been in the ground operations of that radio guidance system, but without it, the spacecraft and its booster cannot be put on the proper course. It is actually without proper control in the boost phase of the flight without that radio command guidance system. Let's try to explain these windows just a little bit for you as to why this mission had to be scrubbed today after only 5 minutes and 47 seconds of concern about it. Once that target vehicle gets overhead, coming around at it's 17,500 miles an hour and 185 miles over the Cape. It's just gone over us here. Of course, we don't see it. We wouldn't see it if the skies were clear, but we couldn't see an airplane up there 20,000 feet today through these clouds. At any rate, it goes over. Now, in order, because of the limit of the fuel aboard the spacecraft and its maneuvering ability and of the problems of orbital physics, the Gemini has to be launched at just precise seconds if it's going to meet the target at any given time. Now, if it wants to meet that target within the first opportunity that they planned for, the third revolution around at any rate, which would have been around 4 this afternoon, it has to go within 35 seconds of the optimum time. If it goes within 2 minutes and 19 seconds, it would have to go around the Earth one more time and meet in the 4th revolution. Now, if it went within 4 minutes and 3 seconds, that means it would have to go around another time. It would be 5 revolutions before it met. Or if it went within that 5 minutes, 47 seconds, it could still make it in the 6th revolution. But these space planners did not want to go beyond that 6th revolution. For one thing, the orbits of these two vehicles would then begin to spread out in such a way that it would, they'd have to go around so much further before they began to meet. And one of the other considerations is that they would be out of touch with certain ground control stations when they got into those later revolutions. So they limited this first day launch to these 6 revolutions. Now, they can't go tomorrow because of that 48-hour re-preparation time here on the ground, so they will go, or try to go, on Friday morning, and Tom Stafford is disappointed again. That radio command guidance system, which apparently was the cause of the difficulty today, is a complicated and highly sophisticated mechanism, and Jay Wolf with the Burroughs Corporation is sitting here with me. Maybe, Jay, you can tell us a little bit something about it, what it does and what might have gone wrong.
Well, yes, Walter, I'd like to describe the function of the guidance system is primarily to transmit steering commands to the Titan vehicle once it is airborne. In addition to this, the guidance system has the function of providing the launch azimuth prior to launch and also updating the spacecraft computer with the proper parameters. And this is what this is where the countdown was held today. At T-3, the Burroughs guidance computer transmits these guidance direction, the launch azimuth, and other parameters to the spacecraft computer, and this is where the countdown was held this morning.
By parameters, you mean other information?
Yes, numerical values coded in such a way as to be acceptable to the other equipment.
Now, do you have any idea at this early time, just 10 minutes after this problem developed, as to what might have been the problem?
We are unable at this point to discuss any specific evaluation of the difficulty, but we are investigating the situation at this time at the guidance site here at Cape Kennedy.
Well, now, in effect, the guidance system equipment aboard the spacecraft operates like computers do, and they have a function in there of saying, I don't believe you. Is that it? And you send a signal out to it, and they say, I don't believe you, or there's something wrong with it, and they reject it, in other words.
Well, the guidance system is set to automatically transmit these numbers over coded lines to the launch pad. If, in order to proceed with the countdown, it is necessary that these signals be verified at the receiving end and transmitted back to the computer, and the computer will then automatically verify the transmission in both directions, and apparently this is what has failed today. We are unable to specify, of course, where the trouble may lie.
Okay, thank you, Jay Wolf, Burroughs Corporation. Thanks a lot. Now, Jack King, Mission Control.
We are now scrubbed with a recycle of 2 days here in the control center and also at Houston. We're attempting to determine what our exact problem was and why the update information did not get to the spacecraft computer as it should. We do not know at this time whether it is a ground problem or what exactly the problem is. It is expected that this information will be learned in a comparatively short time. As soon as it is available, we will relay it to you. What is known at this time is several attempts were made to provide update information to the spacecraft computer. The information is supposed to go directly to the spacecraft computer, not the launch vehicle guidance as reported earlier. For one reason or another, the computer was not able to accept this information. Either it did not get through, or when it did get through, it was rejected. We are trying to clarify this aspect at this time. As soon as we determine the cause of the difficulty, we will pass it on to you. Of interest would be the astronauts' reaction. We were busy trying to monitor the count at the time. The one quote I believe we have at this time is attributed to Gene Cernan, but we will double check this. The quote is, "I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it." This is Gemini Launch Control.
For Gene Cernan, on May 17th, when the Atlas failed and plunged the Agena target vehicle into the sea a few hundred miles southeast of here, Cernan, who was usually a rather restrained man, said, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." And Stafford was alleged to have said, "Oh shucks." What Stafford said today, or is going to be alleged to have said today, we haven't had a report on as yet. Stafford has now gone up that elevator 5 times for one launch. As he said earlier, he's got more elevator time than almost anybody here at the Cape, and he probably has. I doubted it when he said that after 4 times, because there were some of the Mercury fellows who did almost as badly with various scrubs, but Stafford certainly is the champion by today of scrub missions. He had that first Gemini 6 mission was scrubbed, as you know, when the Agena blew itself apart. That was in November. And then in December, they finally got off, or rather, first of all, of course, they had that shutdown of the engine after ignition time, actually, and gave us all the bad moment when Shroud and Stafford were up there in their spacecraft. And then finally, they did get off on the 3rd attempt in Gemini 6. This is now the 3rd attempt for Gemini 9. I was trying to explain to you a little earlier that those launch windows, and it occurs to me that with all of those computers he's got up at the IBM Center in New York, Jack Siegel might be able to do it better. Jack?
Well, Walter, I don't know if we can do it any better, but we'll certainly try with this one computer display that we have right here. We have put onto the 2250 display tube a circle indicating the orbital path of the ATDA. Now let's move that circle so we're looking at it more or less from an edge and put the Earth in the center. Here is the equator, and you'll see the orbital path proceeding over top of the Earth. Here is the United States, and we'll shrink down from the orbital path a dotted line representing the path that the target traces on the surface of the Earth, and we'll put in the latitude of Cape Kennedy, where the vehicles are launched from. So you can see immediately that if the object was launched at this point or at this point, it would be able to enter immediately onto the same orbital plane as the target vehicle. The object is to get into rendezvous using a minimum amount of fuel. So now let's take this one step further, and we'll put on a dot representing the ATDA, and you'll see that as the ATDA is moving around the Earth is also moving. So you have the problem of trying to launch at the exact proper moment when you can get into the same plane of the target, and also to launch at the proper moment so you won't be either ahead or too far behind of that moving target. Now with the computer, we can stop the rotation of the Earth here. So let's shift to another display now, and we'll show you the position frozen, and say here is the ATDA at the intended moment of launch. Here is a launch, and you'll see there is an angle if they launched at this point in between the two planes. NASA can make some correction by inserting yaw steering into the second stage of the Gemini and come a little closer, but you still have a wedge angle. Now, actually, we've greatly exaggerated those angles, Walter. In the last mission, it was only 0.05 of a difference in the angle between the target plane and in the plane of the Gemini. But you still must get in as close as possible to that exact plane. You have to get to the proper position in front or in back of it. And you also have other problems. You want to be able to go in so that your rendezvous will occur, in this case, at darkness, so they're able to have the sky, the stars above, when they were coming in for that first rendezvous. All these factors enter into the problems involved in launch window, and it's mainly a matter of fuel. If they had unlimited fuel, they could launch at practically any time and rendezvous at any time. Any other questions, Walter?
Not for the moment, Jack. I've got a lot of them, but we'll come back and talk about those a little bit later. We do have confirmation now down here now that Tom Stafford indeed did say again today, as he did May 17th, aw shucks. Bridge of Gemini 9 will continue in a moment.
Is there a book that tells how to get children to brush their teeth regularly? We changed to a toothpaste that's meant to reduce cavities.
I can't stand the taste of my toothpaste.
We have the same problem. You need anti-cavity Colgate. Children love its taste. And when dental scientists compared Colgate with the best-known fluoride, their report, published in the Journal of the American Society of Dentistry for Children, confirmed Colgate unsurpassed in reducing new cavities.
Get anti-cavity Colgate today.
Now, you can keep talking, Madge. I can clean the floor while I'm on the phone. No, there's nothing to it. I'm using the white tornado. You know, Ajax liquid. Ammonia? Oh, it's got lots more ammonia than that green stuff. And believe me, where ammonia counts, Ajax means less work. How can I tell about the ammonia in Ajax? By the smell.
This is Walter Cronkite back at our CBS News Space Center at Cape Kennedy. Let's recount for you for a moment what has gone on here this morning at the Cape, in case you missed any part of it, or perhaps have gotten a little bit confused about it, which would be certainly understandable. At 10 o'clock this morning, just about 2 hours ago, Eastern Standard Time, the Atlas Agena, boosted the substitute target vehicle, substituting for the Agena, boosted it into a perfect orbit, almost exactly 185 statute miles high. It was a perfect launch under cloudy skies here at the Cape. The weather had given us some concern, but it cooperated enough to get the launch off. The target vehicle went into a perfect orbit. There is still some concern that perhaps it did not jettison the fairing, the cover that protects the target vehicle during the launch phase of its flight, and has to jettison if the target vehicle is to serve its function of a target for docking in space. An hour and 38 minutes later, on that perfect orbit, the target vehicle was due over Cape Kennedy. Still did not know whether the fairing had been jettisoned, but at least it was up there and could be used as a rendezvous vehicle, if not a docking vehicle, and all of the technical considerations other than the indicator light on the fairing itself indicated that the jettison had taken place. So everything looked good up to that point. But then, with just 5 minutes and 47 seconds of the proper window to put the Titan, the Gemini, into its exact orbit, there came a malfunction in the radio guidance system, apparently, and they had to scrub this mission until Friday morning. Meanwhile, however, surveyors still okay and on the way to the moon. CBS News will take the air at 2 a.m. EDT for the landing on the moon. This is Walter Cronkite at Cape Kennedy.
The Week in Space. CBS News selective color coverage of the mission of Gemini 9 and Project Surveyor. This is CBS.